Hello, everybody. This is Dianne, the OG Real Housewife of Alaska.
And this is Marnell, the littler sister of the OG Housewife of Alaska.
Neither of which are really housewives anymore. They're just house.
No. Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah.
Yeah. Married to my job.
I'm married, but it's complicated. Actually, I'm going to see you 2 weeks from today.
I am. Yes, you are. I will be there.
Be very cool.
Yes. I would say, we could try and podcast while I was there, but we are going to be busy while I'm there.
Oh, I'm going to kind of have other things going on. So,
yeah, just a minute.
So today we're podcasting about the movie Brats, the documentary Brats, which is airing on Hulu right now. Hey, Dexter. And, wow, I chose it because I thought it would be a little less serious than Stormy, a little bit of a palate cleanser, and it turned out for me to be still kind of serious.
Yeah, it was a little sad. I think we all look back so fondly on those movies that I just wasn't prepared for the documentary about those movies.
I agree. So for people who don't know, it is a movie that was created by Andrew McCarthy, who was one of the Brat Pack. And it's about the kids, the young actors who were in their, I think Demi Moore was still in her late teens, but the rest of them were in their early 20s. Yeah. And they got labeled as the Brat Pack, and kind of what the ramifications of that label became. So it turned out to be a pretty intense documentary, at least for me.
It did. I think it was probably a better choice than our other selection that we were going to go with, which was Civil War, which we still may do, but what's up?
Have you watched it?
I have.
And?
I really liked it. It wasn't the greatest movie. Like, I'm glad I didn't pay $20 to see it in a theater.
So you could watch it on Prime or whatever.
True, but here's my thing about going to movies is like it's $20 per person now. So if two of us go, that's $40. Then there's like snacks and drinks and stuff. And you have to be around people. And I don't people. Like after COVID, I just don't people. So I like to watch, I will pay $20 to watch it from the comfort of my own home.
I have to people every damn day. So I kind of get to the point where I'm like, I don't want people either. For the people who are not watching the YouTube post, Marnell just made the vomit emoji with her face, and it was quite funny.
I'm very glad I went into accounting, and specifically governmental accounting. I have a very small group of people that contact me on a semi-regular basis, and that's it.
Well, so back to Brats. Do you want to give your rating first? I think I probably gave my rating first last time.
Sure. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like the worst movie, Solaris, 10 being the best movie, I don't have one.
A Promising Young Woman.
Yes, those are both good.
Yeah.
So my rating was a 6.75 bad Andrew McCarthy wigs.
Oh. I am wounded. I'm wounded like Andrew McCarthy was wounded. Oh my God.
Yeah, like we'll get into it, but like it was surprising, but in like a sad way. And then there's just a couple of things that like kind of struck me. So, what was your rating?
Well, I'm a little embarrassed. It was 9.5 out of 10 duckies.
Whoa.
Yeah, I really liked it. I might have dropped it down to a 9 after my second watch, but I still really liked it.
Yeah, I think it actually, for me, it lost some on the second watch.
It did a little bit for me as well.
Yeah. So, Team Ducky or Team Blaine? Obviously, you're Team Ducky, right?
Oh, Team Ducky.
Yeah. Team Ducky all the way.
Yeah. Poor Andrew McCarthy. I think most of us out in the feral world were Team Ducky.
It would not shock me to find out that we were the outliers, because I could totally see people going for the preppy, that like Ducky just wasn't their jam. But
both of our sisters were Team Blaine.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Was it you? Somebody said to me they were like, Ducky was her gay best friend. Come on.
No.
Somebody said to me, and I was like, He was totally in love with her. Yeah,
he was like, just like sadly puppy dog in love with her. And so the original ending to that movie, like they wound up together and the audiences booed. So obviously we are probably in the minority for our
fair point.
Yeah.
And then for those of you who are like completely lost and thinking, why are we listening to these women? We're talking about the movie Pretty in Pink, which is closely related to Brats, the documentary that we're actually talking about today.
Yes, it is Brat Pack adjacent.
Yes. Or Brat Pack important. I don't know. And you know, the other thing is, speaking of Brat Pack adjacent, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, it kind of was hard to even decide exactly who was in the Brat Pack.
Yes. I mean, I think that there are some core members that we can all agree on.
Right.
But I think, like, the further you get away from those core members in the cinematic universe, the more gray it becomes. And then there's a few that they floated that I was like, I don't consider them Brat Pack at all. Like, they're not even Brat Pack adjacent to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I agree. All right. Well, I think you said, I wrote these down from our conversation a couple of days ago, that it was 83% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that was the critical reception of the documentary. And then it was like in the 60s
for the audience.
For the audience. Yeah. So that's more consistent with your rating.
So, and one of the things we talked about with the Rotten Tomatoes score was the audience rating. I do some statistical analysis for my job, and you can pull data in any different ways to tell you what you want it to say. And so things like race and age and sex and things like that can skew the results. And I feel like Rotten Tomatoes is kind of like a late millennial kind of device. Like, I don't know anybody who's ever rated anything on Rotten Tomatoes. And I'm a young Gen Xer. So I kind of think the people that probably did the rating were on the young side. And so it didn't resonate with them as much. That's just my opinion.
No, I think it's a valid opinion, and there's a part in the documentary where Andrew McCarthy is talking with one of the other actors, and he was talking about how it has become a rite of passage for teenagers to watch these movies now. I don't know that that's true. I can't imagine the 3 teen/young adults in my life sitting down and watching Pretty in Pink and having it resonate for them.
I think there are certain parts of it that would resonate, and I think the further we get away from that in time, those movies in time, the less it resonates. And especially now post-COVID, I really, really don't think like Gen Z and Gen Alpha are really going to resonate very much. There are some things that are always going to, I would think, always going to be universal, and the teenage high school experience, I don't know how much that could have changed between then and now.
I love to watch Breakfast Club, and especially watch Breakfast Club with a young group of people and see if it still is pertinent to their experience.
Yes, because everyone who has watched The Breakfast Club knows who their person is in The Breakfast Club. And you and I, again, have the same person. We're
Yeah.
Ali Sheedy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The other sisters are Molly Ringwald.
Yep. And who did we want to date? I'm sorry. No, not Emilio Estevez's character.
Nope.
Judd Nelson.
Judd Nelson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Gotta love me some Bender.
Yeah. How funny. Well, so I wrote down a little bit of stuff about Andrew McCarthy just because he is the person whose journey this centers around. He's our director. He was the writer of the
writer. Yeah.
So he's listed as an actor, a travel writer, and a director. And some of his directing credits are things like Orange is the New Black and Blacklist. I mean, he's had some really recent, interesting directorial experiences.
Yeah, like that. The Orange is the New Black is probably the most surprising. Blacklist, like, I love that he got to work with James Spader again.
I was going to say he's got that James Spader crossover, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is listed as number 40 on VH1's 100 Greatest Teen Stars of All Time.
I mean, 40 is respectable.
Yeah, 40 is respectable.
Yeah.
He got sober in 1992, which kind of resonates with what he talks about in the movie, because he talks about his 20s just being kind of a drunken blur. He didn't describe it exactly that way, but that was the implication. I guess resonates is going to be the word of the podcast today, I think.
Famous in the 80s. I can't imagine he didn't have either a drinking and or a drug problem.
Right. And it sounds like he did at least have one of those. Right. He just said got sober, so I would suspect it was probably both. He was married. He's been married twice. First to a college sweetheart named Carol Schneider, and he had one child with her. And now he's married to an Irish writer named Dolores Rice, with whom he has 2 children. This I thought was super cool. So he was editor-at-large for a while for National Geographic Traveler, and he actually got an award from them as the Travel Journalist of the Year in 2010.
I think I would watch like an Anthony Bourdain type show of Andrew McCarthy traveling around the world.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm seriously tempted to pick up some of his work. So he wrote a young adult novel called Just Fly Away. And he wrote a book called Walking with Sam, which is his experience walking the pilgrimage of Camino del Santiago with his eldest child, Sam, in 2021. So I'm tempted. I'm starting slowly to pick up reading again. I've got the iPad and I'm doing a little more reading. So those are on my list.
I try, but I think I have 6 books started on Audible and haven't finished them. TikTok has ruined me with my attention span, so podcast episodes is usually what I gravitate to. So
me too. And the problem is like with books on tape, I tend to fall asleep with them, so that's not productive. Then I end up going back and listening to the same stuff over and over again because I have to go back like 40 minutes to catch the 45 minutes that I set my timer for. Yeah. Let's see. He's got, I didn't count them up, I just kind of guesstimated, at least 30 film credits and at least 30 TV credits. He's still working. I mean, he's just not as in the eye as he was when he was a young man in his 20s with the movies that we're kind of talking about that are Brat Pack movies today.
So I was talking about this with somebody last night, and everyone, we of course got into this huge discussion about it because they were super interested in the topic. And everyone that we looked up that was core Brat Pack adjacent, and just in the 80s teen comedy dramedy era, everyone seemed to have at least 100 credits to them and had worked recently. And I think that everybody who wanted a continuing career, because some people withdrew, everyone who wanted a continuing film career after that managed to achieve that. So we'll probably get into a little bit more of that.
Good, because there's actually one particular actor that I want to ask you about that I didn't look up. So I'll be really curious.
Okay.
I think unless you have more to say about Andrew McCarthy in this context, because I'm sure we'll have more to say in general, I think that takes us to our man of the hour, I guess we'll call him today.
Yeah, and maybe in the spotlight.
Yeah, there we go.
So our in the spotlight this episode is John Hughes. And I think everybody in Gen X, at least, and a lot of millennials, you hear the name John Hughes and you know exactly who we are talking about. He only appeared in an episode of Community in the pilot. I don't think he has any other acting credits. And
I think it was a random person, like a random shopper in one of his movies or, things like that.
Yeah.
Acting
never really had much of a speaking role or anything like that.
Right.
And he is somebody that actively shunned fame. And for having all of that, for all of us to know instantly, he was basically the creator of the teen comedy dramedy genre in the 80s. So director, writer, producer John Hughes. Sadly, he did pass away.
Really young, actually.
Yes, he was 59. And you said 2009? No, 2009?
2009, yeah.
2009. Yeah, he had a heart attack on a New York street.
Yeah, he was visiting his kids and went out for a walk and had a heart attack.
That is just so sad to me that we lost him so young.
The thing that's kind of a trip is that he was really good friends with John Candy and wrote for John Candy later in his writing career as a film writer. And John Candy, of course, died of a massive heart attack.
Yeah.
And their mutual friend, Vince Vaughn, said that he felt that John Hughes would have continued to write and would have made more movies had John Candy lived longer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. The thing I remember about John Candy dying is, I think he had a stand-in or a stunt double or something like that, who went on to go through a massive weight loss journey because of what happened to John Candy. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So, it kind of makes me sad that, it maybe didn't inspire John Hughes to eat better. I mean, he by no means was he an unhealthy looking man, but he was very close to John Candy, and it surprises me that it didn't have more effect in that respect.
Although who knows? I mean, who knows why that heart attack happened? Who knows what was
exactly? So, this I think one of the saddest things that I take away from Brats is I did not realize that Molly Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall had kind of a falling out with John Hughes after they filmed Pretty in Pink, I think.
Probably 16 Candles. Anthony Michael Hall was in 16 Candles, but not in Pretty in Pink.
16 Candles was before Pretty in Pink. 16 Candles was 1980, I think.
Oh, I think you're right. 16 Candles was his breakthrough movie. You're right.
Yes, it was his breakthrough movie. And so Molly Ringwald, who did not want to appear in the documentary Brats, she did say that nobody can hold a grudge like John Hughes. And the falling out happened because Molly Ringwald was his muse. I think maybe because 16 Candles was such a hit that's why their careers had a lot of parallel movies, is because, they just worked so well together. Molly Ringwald kind of wanted to move in a different direction at some point. And so, when John came to her with a movie, she declined. And he was very hurt by that. And I think a similar thing wound up happening with Michael Hall.
Anthony Michael Hall.
I think a similar thing wound up happening. And Molly Ringwald has written, most people John knew that he was able to hold a grudge longer than anyone. His grudges were almost supernatural things, enduring years, even decades. Hall suspects that he was never forgiven for turning down the parts in Pretty in Pink. So Anthony Michael Hall was supposed to be in Pretty in Pink.
Yeah.
And Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I turned down later films of his as well. Some Kind of Wonderful. Not because I didn't want to work with John anymore. I loved working with him more than anyone before or since. But Molly, just like in Brats, she wanted to move forward with her career. And I think she wanted to kind of break out of that, teen comedy, dramedy sort of era.
Yeah.
I didn't thread these things together until reading about him, but he's a big Beatles fan, or he was a big Beatles fan. So a lot of his movies will have one of the actors or actresses like singing or dancing to a Beatles song. And so you think of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Yep. And then Ducky singing Hey Jude in Pretty in Pink. And there's been a couple of others that don't pop right into my mind, but he kind of always tried to have that little Easter egg in his movie because he was such a Beatles fan.
Well, one of the things that they talked about in this movie was what an artist he was in terms of putting together soundtracks as well.
Yes. And one of the things that I always kind of found interesting, I as problematic as Joss Whedon we have found him to be now, he seems to be able to write and direct women very well for his shows.
Tell me that I need to
No Me Too for John Hughes. No.
Okay.
No.
Joss Whedon, please tell me I don't need to Me Too Joss Whedon either.
No. Oh yeah, a little. We'll talk about it off pod.
I just don't want to know. We don't need to talk about it off pod because I don't want Firefly to be ruined for me.
Okay. So anyway, John Hughes is one of those men that seems to be able to capture like the experience of being a young girl or a teenager, a female, and it's kind of amazing that, he had that. Well, come to find out, he had 3 sisters growing up. Yes, he had 3 sisters, and when his parents moved him to where he went to high school, or I'm sorry, not just high school. I think he went to primary and maybe middle school. Everyone in the neighborhood had daughters. He was surrounded by girls all the time. It doesn't seem that he had a lot of male friends, and so I kind of think maybe he was the Ducky.
Interesting. Well, with that totally geeky haircut that we saw on the red carpet, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right?
That was a Black Seagulls moment if I've ever seen one.
Yep. And like, I feel, I don't know why. This is just a feeling that I have. Do you remember Ducky's shoes at the end? I feel like that's maybe an inside joke of John Hughes. Like, I feel like maybe those were like his shoes or something. So, yeah. But yeah, it's super sad that, we won't get any more John Hughes movies ever. Let's see. So, did you know that Sherman, Illinois is not a place?
No. Is that the place that Ferris Bueller's Day Off is set in?
So, that is where most of the movies that he directed is set in, is Shermer, Illinois. It's not a real place. Let's see.
His home was Chicago.
It was. I gotta find it. Let's see. One reason that his films were set in Shermer, Illinois is because Northbrook was once called Shermerville, which he lived in Northbrook. Furthermore, Glenbrook North High School is located on Shermer Road. So Shermer, Illinois is a fictional place, but it is based on a real place. And I think that this will probably have a callback for a lot of people who may have watched Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. In that movie, or maybe it was one of the Jay and Silent Bob movies. In that movie, they were trying to travel to Shermer, Illinois, because all of these
Jay and Silent Bob, they had to have been Jay and Silent Strike Back because they went on a road trip in that movie.
Yeah, all of these, because their reasoning was, all of these hot babes go for the dorkiest guys, and so they thought that they would just clean up in Shermer, Illinois, and plus they thought that they'd be, kind of the good pot hook up there. And so I think, like, if you're out there and you're thinking, why did I know that Shermer, Illinois is not a real place? It's probably because of Jay and Silent Bob. So.
Good cat. Good shout out to Jay and Silent Bob. Some of my favorite films are the Jay and Silent Bob films. So very good.
Kevin Smith. Like, we will have to do a Kevin Smith movie at some point. Maybe. So there's a weird Harvey Weinstein Dogma connection where, like, Harvey Weinstein owns the copyright or something to it. And so it's not on, Dogma's not on any streaming, and you cannot buy a copy of it, and unless you own one from back in the day, you can't buy a new copy of it. And so there was something that Kevin Smith posted the other day about that's going to change. So maybe if Dogma comes out on streaming, we'll have to podcast it.
So there's also a really great documentary. I don't want to say that all we're ever going to do is documentaries, but they seem to keep flowing our way, where he actually talks about his run-ins with the Westboro Baptist Church. Yes. He actually made a horror film based on the Westboro Baptist Church. Yes, he did. Yeah. Red State. Yeah. Yes. Oh my God. Oh, I get chills. That movie just gives me chills. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we may end up going down that path at some point. So I think probably the most popular movie from John Hughes was The Breakfast Club. And the reading that I did, they actually said his most critical success was Home Alone, or his biggest box office success. I guess I should say that. It is, but I think The Breakfast Club resonated and still to this day continues to resonate with people. I think there's real truth to that. I hope it's not just my emotional attachment to the movie. I really hope that it truly does still have that kind of power. Yeah. We may have to. There was something that I found. So one last thing that I will say about him. He has written 3 films that have been selected for the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. The Breakfast Club, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Home Alone. He has directed 2 films that are on the registry, Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So I don't think he won. I don't think his movies won a whole lot of awards back in the day. But I mean,
on the National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. I mean, I feel like that's probably one of the highest honors. Like, you can win an Oscar, you can win an Emmy, whatever. Like, but like your film, it put an indelible mark on the cinematic worldview in our history. So, yeah, kind of. I won't say the creator of the Brat Pack, because I think that's probably left to the New York writer
David Bloom, who we'll talk about. Yeah,
but I will say probably the father of the Brat Pack.
That's probably fair.
Yeah.
The only other stuff that I wanted to add is that he actually began his career as a humorist for National Lampoon's, the magazine. And before that, he worked at an ad agency to kind of make ends meet. I thought this was really funny. He worked on the Virginia Slims account. Do you remember Virginia Slims cigarettes?
I do. Our mother smoked them.
I know. And do you remember the Edge credit card cheating test? Are you old enough to remember that? Because I remember that.
It might sound familiar. Refresh my memory.
It's like this guy who shaved with Edge razors, who then takes a credit card and swipes it across his face, and his face is John Hughes was the creator of that ad.
Yeah. Okay.
So I thought, in terms of, again, cultural significance, I thought that was kind of funny to have those things be things that stuck with me, things that I knew. And he also, to make a living when he was working for National Lampoon's, sold jokes to people like Joan Rivers and Rodney Dangerfield.
I know. That is such a trip. I think if you mentioned those two names now in company under 30, they would have no idea who those people are.
None whatsoever.
No.
Unless they had a really cool auntie like one of us. Let's see. He wrote a story called Vacation 58, which was the basis for the National Lampoon's Vacation movie that was so popular. And he decided at one point to move beyond making teen movies, and that was when he started writing movies like the movies that John Candy starred in, Uncle Buck and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
And The Great Outdoors.
I don't remember The Great Outdoors.
Him and Dan Aykroyd take their family on a vacation to, I don't want to say resort, but you could rent a log cabin in the woods type thing. And of course, hilarity ensued.
Of course, hilarity ensued. And I actually thought this was really interesting, and you probably read this too. So P.J. O'Rourke described him as an ardent Republican.
Yes.
And apparently, Ferris Bueller's Day Off was kind of his homage to 1980s capitalism.
Yes.
Which I thought was really interesting. I mean, I guess I just assumed that someone who would write about people like the characters that Judd Nelson and Ali Sheedy played in Breakfast Club, and who would write about the characters that Molly Ringwald and John Cryer played in Pretty in Pink. I just kind of assumed that he would be more liberal than that.
So it's not on his IMDb or his Wikipedia. I can't remember where I read it, but somebody did describe him as a Reagan Republican. And yeah, that is a totally different Republican from what we know today as Republicans.
I'm going to go there. Do we even know what Republicans are anymore?
I don't even think Republicans or Democrats know what they are anymore. I think there are so many subgroups within both parties, because I don't even consider myself a Democrat anymore. I consider myself a leftist.
I'm going to make my first F-bomb of the podcast. I'm fucking following people like George Conway and Reed Galen and Rick Wilson on social media. The Republican operatives. I mean, George Conway was married to Kellyanne Conjob. I mean, come on.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I suspect that John Hughes probably would not recognize his party either.
No, it would be one of those things where I hear a lot of Reagan Republicans say that, my party, I didn't leave my party left me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, something that I read basically said that they don't think that John would recognize the party today. So, yeah.
See, we can make the Brat Pack political.
Well, I am going to make it racial a little later. We'll get to that.
Yeah, as the documentary did, and appropriately so. So, skipping forward, do you have any news about anything that we talked about last time, or anything that's in the news that kind of set you on fire?
No. It took a few days for Stormy to start tweeting again. And I think a lot of it was really her just clapping back at people who were tweeting at her. She has a lot of engagement with her haters on her social media.
And she did a documentary as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have heard more than one source basically dub her Saint Stormy for taking down the guy that nobody could pin anything on before. I think E. Jean Carroll beat her to it, but to have the former president taken out by a former porn star who is now a director and a writer and a mom and a horse enthusiast, like not just a porn star.
Although she continues to be referred to as the porn star, which really bugs me.
Yeah.
Well, so my news was SCOTUS still has not ruled on presidential immunity. We're not going to find out until probably Monday what their ruling on full or partial immunity in the Mar-a-Lago documents case is going to be. Judge Mershon lifted the gag order against witnesses, and now Donald Trump can also make general statements about jurors. He can't dox any jurors. He can't single particular jurors out, but he can make general statements like, oh, the jury was rigged, and not get in trouble for it any longer. He still cannot speak out against court staff, prosecutors, or their family members.
I mean, when you say can't, he's just like, he'll get into trouble if he does. When has he ever been told not to do something and he listens? Like,
I'm fine with that. If he wants to break the gag rule, I'm fine with that, because that means fines, possible jail time. I'm good with that, because he'll be breaking parole or probation. Probation. Probation.
A lot of leeway in the original trial. The judge gave him just way too much rope, but he never managed to hang.
Yeah. So have at it, Donnie. Come on. Tell us what you have to say about the prosecutors, their families, and the court. We'd love to hear it.
That scared the crap out of Dexter. For those of you not watching, I have my dog on a bed behind me, and just as Diane was saying that, he like leapt up like something had like just totally startled him.
So the other thing I had to say, and we could talk for hours about this, so we probably should not talk about it hardly at all if we do, is that when we were getting ready to record, I wrote, the first presidential debate is tomorrow, and now I'm like, I'm not even sure I want to go there.
So that's a thing that happened. Honestly, what was the point of it? Like, I just hate this whole, like, well, we're doing it for the swing voters or the independents. Nobody's undecided. I'm sorry. You are not undecided. And if you are, nothing that is said in the debates, nothing that was said in the debates is going to sway you. Like, not even who has a better golf swing.
I am just going to hate on Dana Bash and Jake Tapper, just like everybody else, for a second. I'm going to pile on because those fuckers should have been doing some fact checking.
We would still be sitting here if they had to fact check everything that was lied about in that debate. Like, I can't imagine, like, yeah. No.
I forget which podcaster I was listening to. I think it might have been Molly Jong-Fast. It might have been Rick Wilson. It was somebody along those lines. And it was like, they said that they counted 30 falsehoods in the debate from Donald Trump's side of the podium.
I did appreciate the mic muting. I liked that they weren't able to talk over each other. I really wish that they would have been basically forced to stick to the question, forced to answer the question, because what wound up happening is they kept going back. So they'd get asked a question, they'd talk, the other person would get a chance to rebut. And I think there was even a minor rebuttal on but they kept going back and rebutting each other on the issues. And, it was a bad format. Neither one did great. But it was exactly, I think, as we all expected it to be, no matter which side you were on. Those of us on the left expected Donald Trump to lie, and he lied. And the people on the right expected the Crypt Keeper, and that happened.
Wow.
But I'm willing to vote for a corpse at this point. Like, they can weekend at Bernie's Biden in the White House for all I care. Like, what it really amounts to is the figurehead that appoints the people around them making the actual decisions and appointing judges. So,
speaking of which, the people around them, I'm also going to cap on the people who were prepping Joe Biden for the debate. What the actual fuck?
In what respect?
Could they not have prepared him better? Could he not have been a little more on? Could they not have created a situation where maybe he responded appropriately to things that, I don't know,
Could they not get him a lozenge?
Some hot tea with a little bit of whiskey. Come on.
I saw a video of him earlier in the day, and he was greeting people, I think, as he got off Air Force One. And so he was doing crowd work earlier in the day. So they say that he was sick, he had a cold or something, but I honestly think that he probably strained his voice, talking to a crowd of people, which, I mean, you can say that was probably a bad idea. He should have been resting his voice prior to, but it is what it is. Like, we all took away what we wanted to take away.
Wandered off mentally during the debate, and I was like, hello.
The thing that was killing me, and I think I texted you, that he needed to close his mouth.
Yeah.
Like, he does not have a poker face. And so, just that look of incredulity. Incredulous. Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes, we were all probably doing that sitting at home too, but you're standing up there and you are memeable, dude. I'm sure him with his mouth gaping open and that vacant stare is just making the rounds on
the socials. Yeah.
Yep.
The only other thing that I had in news was actually, where's Molly? And I don't know if you want to save that for later, as in Molly.
Yeah, let's save that for later.
Okay, I'll save that then. Do you have any housekeeping?
I don't.
My housekeeping is that I'm rushing off after this to go cook a linguine dinner for Rob and his three kids. So
very cool.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous because I'm not that good of a cook, but here we are. I did get Brienne bread and cupcakes, so if nothing else, I'll feed them cupcakes.
That reminds me of Practical Magic. They eat brownies for breakfast. And now, like, all I can think is Practical Magic 2 is a thing.
It better be a good thing. That's all I have to say.
I want that house. The house is fake. It wasn't a real house, but I still want that house. Barbara Streisand wanted that house, too. She inquired about buying it. Thought that was funny.
Do you get the Death Watch beetle with it?
I think that's optional, depending on the man you're with. It doesn't come standard with the house. It's an option.
I don't want the Death Watch beetle.
Neither do I.
No. All right. Well, I guess that takes us to our goods, bads, and uglies. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
You go ahead and go first.
My good was Ali Sheedy. She just looked so freaking normal. I mean, she's aged well. She's aged appropriately. It's clear that she hasn't had a whole bunch of work done. You know, it was really
Her face
nice.
was so normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really just great to just see her looking like she was having a peaceful life and thriving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not rich, not famous, just thriving, just doing really well.
Yeah, probably doing a lot of whatever she wants.
So she was the person I was going to ask you about when you and the person you were talking with last night. Did you look her up to see if she had done anything? Because I did not look up to see if she's done any further acting.
So she is a recurring character currently on not currently, 2022 to 2023, a show called Single Drunk Female. And I know a couple people that have told me that I need to watch that movie. So, yeah. She was also in X-Men Apocalypse.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
She played Scott's teacher.
That was actually a dreadful movie. That was my least favorite X-Men movie, but it's not her fault.
I don't think that I watched that one. I might have.
Don't bother. If you're going to go back and watch an X-Men movie, watch one of the Wolverine movies, watch Logan, watch the new Wolverine Deadpool movie that's coming out. Don't bother watching Apocalypse.
Good to know. So she hasn't done much. It seems like she'll go a couple of years, a year or two between gigs. She in 2023 she was in a movie called Chantilly Bridge. Haven't seen it. She was in one episode of a TV series called Smilk. And in 2018 she was in The Breakfast Club deleted scenes. So I kind of want to search that one out now.
Wow, no kidding.
I want deleted scenes from The Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Because that was one other thing with John Hughes is he was known to shoot like 4 hours worth of a movie. Like there would be like you could edit together the movie into like a 4-hour plot, like not just like the takes and retakes. But like there was 4 hours worth of material that they usually cut down into about an hour and a half's worth of movies. And unfortunately, the rest of the film has been lost to history.
No.
We could never get director's cuts like we should. Yeah.
Because Ali Sheedy was the one who said, that he would let you improv to the point where you just heard the film slapping against the canister because you ran out of film.
Yep. So I will have to see if I can find Breakfast Club deleted scenes.
Yeah. Let me know if you do. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, so what was your good?
My good was that almost all of them were able to come back together. So we'll get into like why a lot of them haven't talked for decades. But this movie, this documentary that Andrew McCarthy decided to do, none of the other ones seemed to want to do it. He was the one that wanted to revisit it. And he had to do some arm twisting here and there to get a few people to, appear on the documentary. And there was a couple that didn't want to appear on the documentary, but he still made contact with them and was able to sort of bridge that gap that had happened, throughout the years. that seem to be directly related to them being called the Brat Pack.
Oh my God. That article was like a nuclear bomb.
I had never read it. And
did you go back and read it?
I did. That dude had a hard on for his hate for Judd Nelson. It was an interview with Emilio Estevez, but like half of it was talking about what a terrible person Judd Nelson was.
Really?
Yeah. He was like boorish, and he was a drunk, and he was a womanizer, and like all these things.
Of course, that's what I wanted to date. God.
Yeah. It went on to praise a bunch of the others, Rob, Emilio, Tom. But he really had something against Judd Nelson. And I kind of think that's maybe why Judd Nelson kind of opted to not appear on the documentary. But I loved the very, very end when Andrew McCarthy's phone rang and he's like, Judd!
Do you really think it was Judd Nelson?
I do.
I'm holding out hope that it really was.
So I think maybe
with his iconic, arm up from the Breakfast Club.
I think maybe that scene was maybe dramatized for the cameras, but I kind of think that Andrew McCarthy was able to reach out and contact Judd.
I really hope so.
But, yeah, I mean he got a hold of just about everyone, and Demi was in the documentary, and that it was surprising, that she wanted to revisit it, and that Molly didn't.
And she's spending a lot of time with Bruce Willis right now, who unfortunately is suffering from aphasia and dementia. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of fascinated that she was willing to take time away and sit down and do the interview for this documentary. Yeah. And can we just talk for just a second about how much Emilio Estevez looks like his dad?
It kind of took me aback too, because Charlie has always looked like his dad. I don't think Emilio ever, I'm like, are we sure that's his kid? And now you totally see it.
Yeah.
100%.
And he was great. I think he was a little tiny bit on the defensive initially because Andrew McCarthy was like, dude, you did this article. It was supposed to be all about you. What the fuck? And I felt like that was not the best way to start the interaction, but they ended up having a really good interaction.
But I very specifically remember that because I kept thinking that, Andrew probably talked to these people on the phone for a while before they agreed. But that seemed to be completely organic. That wasn't rehearsed. They didn't reshoot anything. That was a serious conversation that they were having for the first time. I very much appreciated, there was definite tension between those two when it first started, and I think they came to a good place at the end.
I think so too.
I would love to see them all reconnect privately. They don't have to go and do interviews with each other. They don't have to do a Brat Pack Part 2 documentary. But I would love for them to reconnect because I think that they were really robbed of some really good friendships and maybe some networking because of their aversion to being in the Brat Pack. So what was your bad?
My bad was that Andrew McCarthy has carried this for so long, that he's carried the grief and the pain around that article and around what really was a nuclear bomb to his career. Yeah. He's 61 years old. The article came out when he was 22. And it's just now that he's finally gaining some peace around it. And I just think it's so terribly sad that he carried that for so long.
Yeah. that's, I think we both went into this thinking it was going to be a movie about like our favorite movies and actors when we were young. And it wound up being a very kind of heartfelt told story about, the damage that this article did to these people.
And even the author of the article, David Bloom, talked about collateral damage. Yeah. And he was so casual about talking about the collateral damage from his article. And Andrew McCarthy was like, yeah, collateral damage. There truly was collateral damage.
So I wrote down something that Demi said. It was close to the end of the documentary. She said, it wasn't even about us. It was about who wrote it and him trying to get his next job. And she was saying,
too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she was saying it in a way that she didn't have any malice towards him. They were all starting out their acting career and things were booming. And this was the first in a 5 commissioned article so the author is David Bloom. And this was in the,
June 1985.
Yeah, it's not the New Yorker. It's just New York.
No, it's the New Yorker magazine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he had been contracted to do 5 articles, and this was the first of the 5. And so I don't think, as much as he seemed to hate Judd Nelson, I don't think he meant for this to be the cultural juggernaut that it became and have such a resounding effect on all of these actors. He was just writing an article,
The other thing that was so fascinating for me was to find out that he was 29 when he wrote it. So he was basically 7 years older than Andrew McCarthy was.
Yeah.
And I think it was a true case of some jealousy, some spite, some I'm cooler and smarter than you because I'm this fancy writer and you're just some brat who starred in some cheesy movie. I think it kind of all of those things were in play.
Did you read the article?
No, I wish I had. I mean, I'm envious that you thought to do that and I didn't think.
So I think, and I can't, I'm just going to paraphrase, part of the article went into, the sort of, the problem that people had with the Brat Pack or all of these young actors and actresses was everyone said that they didn't do their time, that they didn't put in, the work beforehand
so quickly. Yeah.
It was literally like they were cast in a John Hughes movie and boom, they're demanding $1 million a movie, You
remember the Donahue clip where Donahue was like, we're concerned you're going to get spoiled. We're concerned that you're going to become entitled.
Yes. But so one of the things, and I can't remember who was specifically in the article or in something that talked about the article, was they talked about the years of when Marlon Brando was coming up, that, he did all of this training and this stage acting and these people go to Juilliard and they do all of these things. And, Demi was picked up off the street, basically, their old Marilyn.
Which I didn't realize.
Yeah, the old Marilyn Monroe thing where it's she was discovered in a diner in Hollywood, and so everyone felt like they just didn't put in the work, that they didn't deserve what they had because they hadn't suffered for it.
It's so interesting that you say that because it brings to mind another point in the time when Andrew McCarthy sat down with David Bloom toward the end of the documentary. David Bloom looks at him and he says, well, you went to acting school. You went to NYU and you graduated, didn't you? And Andrew McCarthy was like, no, I got kicked out. But, he kind of tried to give Andrew McCarthy a little more importance because he went to acting school.
Yeah.
So it goes back to what you were saying about the tone of the article being that these people got something that they didn't deserve because they didn't put in their time.
Yeah.
Well, what was your bad?
So my bad, and I actually talked about this with my son last night, because I asked him, I was like, when you hear the words Brat Pack, do you have a negative connotation that goes with that? He's like, no. And so he hadn't watched the documentary. So I was like, you need to watch this documentary. I was like, apparently all of the people that were in the Brat Pack hated being called the Brat Pack. And so I was really, my bad was that it made me really sad to find out that, like, you know, like for us, the Brat Pack was like the in crowd. They were the popular kids. They were the ones you wanted to hang out with. And all this time we had it in our heads, he and I, that, we, you know, they partied together and like they enjoyed each other's company and they wanted to work with each other and all these things. And come to find out, like, it was completely the opposite, because of this article that called them brats.
They ran as fast from each other as they could.
Right. And I always took it, and originally it's a play on the Rat Pack.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, you know, like Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. are like hanging out together, and that's really cool. And like, I could see them not wanting to be called rats, you know? So like them being in the Rat Pack, and that always seemed to be like where you wanted to be. The Brat Pack was just our generation's Rat Pack. And that's what I envisioned. And it wasn't that. And I never knew that.
Me either. Know? Not until watching this movie.
Yeah, because like even a lot of them did go on to star in movies with each other or star in teen comedies that were Brat Pack adjacent. So
I can't remember who it was. I can't remember if it was Demi Moore or if it was Leah Thompson, but one of them said this was really the signal that you were taking over from old Hollywood.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think probably it was The Outsiders, that even though like some of us have a hard time thinking that as a Brat Pack movie.
Yeah, I don't think that's a Brat Pack movie.
Yeah, but that seemed to kick off a lot of because it's not a comedy. But that seemed to kick off the interest in wanting teen stars in movies. Like, there really didn't seem to be much of that. And then there was this explosion of it in the 80s. And I think a lot of that has to do with the yuppie consumerism of the 80s where, you know, like you wanted to see cool kids on screen and see what they were wearing. So you could go to the mall and buy what they were wearing. And you wanted to go to the theater like every Friday night with your friends and hang out. And a lot of theaters were in malls. And like, I think there was just this culture that happened, and these just happened to be the most attractive actors that were nearby, and poof, you have the Brat Pack, you know? Yeah.
So who was in the Brat Pack? Because for me, I think, and correct me, because I know that you probably will, so I think Emilio Estevez, I think Molly Ringwald, I think Andrew McCarthy, I think Michael Anthony Hall. I would have said John Cryer, although John Cryer was like, I was not part of the Brat Pack. I would not have put Rob Lowe in it. I would not have put Demi Moore in it. Yeah, it's really interesting when you talk to people, like, who they say was the Brat Pack and who was not.
And I loved that they did use the verbiage of Brat Pack adjacent, because like I feel like I was thinking that before even anyone said it. And so I was like, okay, that's a thing. Brat Pack adjacent is a thing. And so I feel like the core Brat Pack is everyone who was in St. Elmo's Fire.
Which I've watched. Have you watched it?
I have. And I said that I had a very controversial opinion of it. I don't like it.
I kind of feel like I have to go watch it now. But it probably did not age well.
So, not totally, but so here's my problem with the Brat Pack, or I'm sorry, with St. Elmo's Fire, is that it was a bunch of kind of, and when you watch it, like, yes, there are some kids that seem to be lower middle class, but you and I were lower middle class. These people were not lower middle class.
Girl,
so for me,
lower class, so
for me, these kids were upper middle class, and so like they are portrayed as like, you know, some of them are like eating top ramen and sleeping in apartments with bare walls, and like, you know, like, so it's a bunch of young 20-somethings who are upper middle class, in my opinion, and like they've just graduated college or whatever, and they're just kind of like starting out into adulthood, and that I did not like, that was not my life experience. So that doesn't resonate with me at all. There's a couple of really cheesy things that happen in the show that I'm just like, one of them is, Demi Moore, spoiler alert, like she tries to commit suicide by like wearing like basically a nightgown in a room with all of the windows open. Like, she's just going to freeze herself to death.
Oh my God.
So dramatic. And I just, like, the movie just does not resonate with me. And I don't know if I had watched it earlier in life, and if it maybe it would have, like, I would have been interested in it. It still wouldn't have resonated with me, but I would have been interested. I did not watch it until a few years ago. And so maybe it's because it didn't hold up. So I am not a St. Elmo's Fire fan, but the cast of St. Elmo's Fire for me is the core Brat Pack. It's Demi Moore, Rob Lowe, Andrew McCarthy, Emilio Estevez, Judd Nelson, Ali Sheedy. So a lot of people say Tim Hutton. I don't see him in here. I would have never considered him Brat Pack, but
I like what Andrew McCarthy said. Didn't he call him the father of the Brat Pack?
Yeah. It was almost like I didn't consider him Brat Pack because he was too old.
Yeah.
So one other star in St. Elmo's Fire, Mare Winningham.
Oh yeah. I remember Mare Winningham.
Yeah, and I don't feel that even though she is in St. Elmo's Fire, I would say that like, I don't think she's core Brat Pack, and it's not anything against her. I think that she didn't seem to, like, you didn't see her a lot at like the parties, you know, that you look back at the footage or like read the tabloids and stuff like that. She didn't go out and do any of the things with the young people of Hollywood. And then she also went on to do a lot of television instead of film. And so for me, she's not core Brat Pack.
The other thing is, when I think about core Brat Pack and Brat Pack adjacent, there are so many crossovers, and she's not someone who's part of that whole crossover culture.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I gotta tell you, okay, a couple of movies that we haven't talked about, at least one movie we haven't talked about, Weird Science. One of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
Junior was in that movie. He had just a little bit part in that movie.
I love that movie. Also a John Hughes movie.
Yeah. With the main song by Oingo Boingo, I might say.
So what was your ugly?
My ugly was that it was so healing. It was a good ugly. It was so healing for Andrew McCarthy to take this journey. And, it was ultimately healing for me, too. Like, the first time I watched the film, I was so sad. I had this lingering sadness for, like, a day after watching the film, from watching the film. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, okay, this feels good. Because this feels like he's gained some peace from doing that.
I think they all did. Yeah. I think they all did.
The other thing that impressed me so much was that Rob Lowe and Demi Moore both were they were just so zen about it. They really had the best perspective of anybody, which really shocked me.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine was a bad ugly. And
okay.
I said we'd get to it. And it's always been kind of a thing. Speaking as a middle-class white woman, the lack of racial diversity in these movies. That they explain it. Yes, they explain it. But like, it kind of makes me sad to look back at that and to not have that inclusion. I can't imagine what it would be like growing up and not having representation. Having seen things like Black Panther and like Jordan Peele movies and things like that, and to see people have that representation and what it means to them, you and I will never know what that's like.
Right.
And I can't imagine like growing up like in that time, you know, as our ages, and seeing not being fully represented on, you know, in media. And so it's like, yeah, I see teenagers, I see guys, I see girls, I see the high school experience, all this stuff, but I don't see me in any of those people, you know, like that made me really sad.
So they talked to that pop culture critic, Ira Madison the third, who was the one black guy that they talked to in the film. And he made the point, I'm fairly sure that he made the point of, you know, this is like white, middle class, you have one black kid in your class. And I was like, oh my God, that was true for us.
It was. It very, very much was. And so they explain it in the documentary as, for one, I mean, you generally write what you know. And so the writers, directors, producers, all these people were white men. And so they were writing about their experiences or things that they would like to see. And the other thing is the reason why these were their experiences is because although we had ended racial segregation in, what was it, the 60s, we still had things like redlining. And so you didn't have a lot of people who were ethnically diverse in these suburban neighborhoods. Even in fictional ones like Sherwood, Illinois, you know? And so, like, it's not until you get later into, like the 90s, in television and movies, when you start seeing the one token black friend, and maybe, just maybe, you have a male and a female token black friend, you know? And so, like, in the 80s, like, you didn't get that. And it always struck me. But I never understood why. And this documentary kind of pointed out why, is because there wasn't a lot of ethnic diversity, you know, for a lot of us growing up. If you lived in a suburban neighborhood, or if you lived in a small town in Alaska, that, you know, the most ethnically diversity that I had in my classes was, we have Alaska Natives, and I think we had one Vietnamese girl. I didn't have like any friends who were Mexican. I didn't have any friends who were black. There wasn't a lot of diversity in my town, which
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. The capital city of Alaska, but like, you know, it was the 80s and 90s. So, not a lot.
It was Malcolm Gladwell who pointed out, you know, that Brown versus the Board of Education was in 1954, but basically we just resegregated along racial lines in different ways.
Yep. Yeah. So that was my ugly. I consider it a bad ugly just because, like, it makes me sad that, you know, that was the way it was. But
it didn't dawn on you as a kid, and it didn't dawn on me as a kid.
No, and like it's only when we become adults and we start like doing our own research and listening to other voices that you can look at something from a completely different perspective. And as a middle class white woman, I would have never stood out to me when I was younger, but it definitely stands out to me now.
So
good, bad, and ugly.
Any notes that we haven't gone over?
I absolutely loved Andrew McCarthy ordering the food at the food truck and talking to the kid behind the counter, and the kid having no idea what the Brat Pack was.
Yeah. Oh, I think I've heard of that. You mean the Rat Pack?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to list off a few of the people who were people that we haven't talked about that were in the film that was kind of cool. So Malcolm Gladwell, who is a famous cultural author. Bret Easton Ellis, who wrote Less Than Zero. I think Leah Thompson is actually married to the director that they talked to, Howie Deutsch.
Yep.
Who is the director of Pretty in Pink.
Yep.
Of course, David Bloom, the author of the article that was the bomb that set off the whole Brat Pack thing, for better or for worse.
I know, and I knew of the article. I had never read it until now. I couldn't have told you David Bloom's name. I will probably forget his name, a couple of days from now. And I wrote something down when Andrew was interviewing David, and it was nobody remembers the doctor. We all remember the monster. So his legacy was the monster that was the Brat Pack moniker. Nobody remembers outside of certain circles remembers David Bloom, but we all remember the Brat Pack.
Right. I found him to be a very interesting person in that he seemed to understand that it was damaging, but he had no regrets. So
the next thing that I wrote about him was he had a very ends justify the means attitude, in that, well, you guys were still very famous and we're talking about it 30 years later, so was it really that bad? But I mean, you did some definite damage to the psyche of a bunch of young people.
Oh my God, I wrote down, and just actor after actor, that changed my life. It was the defining thing in my life. This happened to all of us. It fell down on all of us. I felt derailed.
I mean, the way that Emilio still talks about the movie that he didn't do, with the best script he had ever read, and they didn't do the movie because he felt almost like it wouldn't have been received in the way that he wanted, because he was Emilio Estevez, chairperson of the Brat Pack,
Right.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to do the movie with Andrew McCarthy because of the whole Brat Pack association.
Yep.
Yeah. John Cryer, I was really taken aback, and he said that he felt like the author wrote from the perspective of that they needed to be taken down a peg.
Yeah.
One of the casting directors described it as condescending and reductive. I mean, it was like person after person after person who talked about how painful it was.
Yeah. And so if you go to read the article now, there is an editor's note at the beginning of it. Hollywood's Brat Pack by David Bloom first appeared June 10th, 1985, issue of New York Magazine. In June 2024, Brats, Andrew McCarthy's documentary about our story, the actors it grouped together and its aftermath, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival before streaming on Hulu. 40 years and a documentary later, Bloom is sticking by his definitions of the cohort.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, he clearly had no regrets, even though he agreed that he'd hurt people.
Yeah, he said, in retrospect, Bloom thought the name Brat Pack was scathing, but that the members embraced it.
Yeah, they didn't really seem like they embraced it to me. No. Certainly not when we heard all these interviews.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
So, here's some excerpts from the article that I kind of want to read. So he talked about certain members of what was deemed to be the Brat Pack then. One of the members of the Brat Pack, he described the hottest of them all, Tom Cruise, 23. He first made it
as being in the Brat Pack. I don't.
Neither do I. No, that's why I said what they deemed the Brat Pack back then. So he made his mark in Taps and went on to star in the youth movie classic Risky Business. The huge success of that movie, it made $30.3 million, which is a good chunk of change for a movie in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Gave Tom Cruise the leverage to get over $1 million per movie. And so I think the reason why we don't see Tom Cruise as a member of the Brat Pack is a lot of us don't think of The Outsiders as a Brat Pack movie, but that's the crossover that he had with like Matt Dillon and a bunch of other, I would say a bunch of Ralph Macchio, Emilio Estevez, like a lot of Brat Pack and Brat Pack adjacent people were in The Outsiders. And that was about the first movie that kind of came out. And, so after that, Cruise's career started to take off. He had Risky Business. And so he became less of a teen actor after Risky Business. And he went on to star in things like Top Gun and, Few Good Men and things like that. And so he became more of a serious grown-up actor, and he could command $1 million per movie. And he was the first actor to command $20 million a movie. So I think that's probably why he's not considered, even though he has the same, just as much, if not more, crossover as a bunch of other people who some people consider Brat Pack or Brat Pack adjacent.
Hail Xenu.
The Most Beautiful Face, Rob Lowe, 21. He showed it first to moviegoers in The Outsiders, and then starred in Class, and then The Hotel New Hampshire. He stars in St. Elmo's Fire. So he called Rob Lowe the most beautiful. The overrated one, Judd Nelson, 25. He made his reputation as a hood in Making the Grade and The Breakfast Club, and now in St. Elmo's Fire. He shows with his role as a congressional assistant, he was better off when typecast.
Oh, what a shitty thing to say.
Yeah, and this is after he talked about like kind of his boorish behavior when he was out with Emilio and a couple of other guys, like that he was, yeah. The one with the Oscar, Timothy Hutton, 24. He got started ahead of the others as a troubled teen in Ordinary People, then joined the Brat Pack in Taps. Fellow Brats whispered that he made one too many flop. Turks 182 was its name, and now must revive his career or risk being forgotten. That didn't happen.
Why? My God, what an awful article.
The least likely to replace Marlon Brando. The least likely to replace Marlon Brando. Matt Dillon, 21. Everyone thought he would do it back when he made Tex and The Outsiders. But he eased into lower gear with The Flamingo Kid, a comedy that did well at the box office. Okay. The ethnic chair. For those of you who are listening and not watching, I'm making a face. The ethnic chair. Nicolas Cage, 21. What? The ethnic chair? Nicolas Cage? I'm sorry, what?
Explain to me, please, because Nicolas Cage, in my recollection, is like the whitest dude ever.
Right?
I mean, Valley Girl. I guess because he's related to Francis Ford Coppola.
Yes.
Coppola?
A nephew of Francis Ford Coppola. He changed his famous surname and took out an eye tooth to play the role in Birdie, which made his reputation as an actor. His ethnic looks usually land him the part of the brother or the best friend. What? One, I never considered Nicolas Cage Brat Pack.
Yeah, or Brat Pack, yeah.
And I still, like, you could make the argument he's Brat Pack adjacent. I still don't consider him the ethnic chair. Sorry. No. Nicolas Cage, get the fuck out of here. There's the soundbite for the episode. The most gifted of them all. Sean Penn, 24. He is a natural heir to Robert De Niro's throne. Like his mentor.
We're talking about the guy who played Jeff Spicoli. Yes, I know he went on to do great things, but oh my god, we're talking about the guy at that point who played Jeff Spicoli.
He played Harvey Milk. Like, he redeemed himself.
And he did Dead Man Walking. I mean, he's a great actor, but at that point in time when that article was written...
Yes. Which I don't consider, and they didn't consider Fast Times at Ridgemont High a Brat Pack movie.
Yeah, Brat Pack movie. Yep, I agree.
Yeah. Penn will transform himself for any role he takes. The result having been awesome. From the surfer Jeff Spicoli at Fast Times Ridgemont High to the drug dealer Dalton Lee in The Falcon and the Snowman. The not quite there. The two Matthews, Matthew Broderick and Matthew Modine. Both are fine actors. Broderick in War Games and on Broadway, and Modine in Birdie, but both live in New York, and the Brat Pack likes them but doesn't know them. The same goes for Kevin Bacon, 26, for Footloose and Diner.
I gotta tell you, I like David Bloom even less.
Read the article. It's pretty bad.
Horrible.
Yeah. I can see why a documentary was made, 40 years later.
About the article.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sad that Andrew McCarthy carried it with him for as long as he did, but my God, just the little bit that you shared, how awful.
Yeah. And like I said, I knew of the article and like how they got their name and that they were named this. I had no idea that they loathed it so much and that the article was this scathing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, having gone through it together, does your rating change?
Yeah. I'll bump it up to a solid 8.
It changed quite a bit.
It did. We tried to podcast a couple of days ago, but we had technical difficulties. So I almost wanted to rewatch it again today, but I didn't. So, talking about it, I think really the biggest thing it does for me is it makes me want to go and watch all these movies again.
It makes me definitely want to watch some of them again. Like, I'd like to watch Breakfast Club again. Actually, strangely, for some reason, would like to watch Ferris Bueller's Day Off again.
Yes, same.
Yeah. I can't get Rob to watch anything from the 80s. He's like, no, none of it aged well. No.
I was going to say, I do not recommend Pretty in Pink. It did not age well at all. Like, I mean, when the popular guy gives his drunk girlfriend to the nerd to do whatever with, that doesn't hold up well. Sorry. I can't believe that was ever part of a comedy movie. You know?
Wait, that was 16 Candles.
What did I say?
You said Pretty in Pink.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry. 16 Candles. Yes. Pretty in Pink kind of holds up. I don't think there's anything real objectionable, except for James Spader, which he was supposed to be. So he did well in that. Which, again, somebody you wouldn't consider Brat Pack, but was in a ton of movies with core members of the Brat Pack.
Yeah.
But yeah, last night we were trying to name off all of the Brat Pack adjacent, and like we said, we never considered Tom Cruise. Patrick Swayze did the one movie, he did Outsiders, and then he like Tom Cruise, he went on to more serious roles. And Sean Penn apparently was one of the OG Brat Packers. None of us consider, Fast Times at Ridgemont High was not a Brat Pack movie. That was...
I don't consider Leah Thompson to even be Brat Pack adjacent.
So she did Some Kind of Wonderful, which is a John Hughes movie. That was the movie that Molly Ringwald was supposed to do. So I don't know if she was supposed to be Leah Thompson's character.
And it was Eric Stoltz, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Another movie that did not resonate with me because I don't know why we would fight over Eric Stoltz.
Come on.
Oh. Yeah, so just talking about all the young stars that could possibly be Brat Pack adjacent, and the movies that were Brat Pack adjacent, because look at so there's Say Anything with John Cusack. John Cusack was in One Crazy Summer with Demi Moore, which was not really a teen comedy, but it was a comedy.
He was also in Weird Science. He had a small role in Weird Science.
That's right, he did. So, you don't think of John Cusack as Brat Pack, but he is very solidly Brat Pack adjacent.
Oh, God, speaking of which, I saw an ad for a book by Ione Skye, who was in Say Anything. She was the female lead.
Oh.
And the book is called Say Everything. And it's her memoir.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. I love that we have all grown up and gotten older, and that we're able to look back at a better time, growing up. So Di and I are about 10 years apart. I am on the cusp of being a millennial. I was born, but if I'd have been born 2 weeks later, I would have been a millennial. So I was I was a very young Gen Xer. You were...
I was in the middle of Gen X, yeah.
You had a totally different experience from mine, but I think living in Alaska, I feel more Gen X than I do millennial, even though I'm closer in age to the millennials than I am with a lot of the Gen X. Because Alaska, back then at least, always seemed to be about 3 to 10 years removed from everything. We didn't get MTV when MTV started. We got it about 3 years later, the fashion trends were about 10 years behind, so watching these movies was watching a different, species than us. But it's the universal experience of being a teenager at that time, or an early 20-somethings. I think that's what really came through, and I think that's what spoke to us and gave us these warm and fuzzy feelings we have about these movies.
I actually wanted to also read that book, and I don't know if I wrote the title down. I hope I did. Bear with me. They talked to someone who was one of the critics. Susanna Gora was her name, and she wrote a book called You Couldn't Ignore Me If You Tried, The Brat Pack, John Hughes, and Their Impact on a Generation. And I was thinking as they were talking to her, boy, I'd really like to read that book. That would be really fun.
You and your book learning. I'm
going to try. I'm trying to get back into it. I'm actually reading a really beautiful book right now called Another Word for Love. And it's a memoir of an LGBTQ black man. Okay. I thought it
was going to be some romancy thing.
No. It's actually quite painful memoir about his childhood. And then I'm assuming we get into his adulthood and see that his life has been somewhat redeemed, because God, his childhood is painful.
Take back my eye roll.
Yeah, I heard that on NPR, and it's actually the first book that I downloaded when I got my new used iPad. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So that, I think, like, I only had like a page and kind of a page and a third of notes. The rest was just talking about the cool actors and actresses that like shaped our lives.
I wrote down a lot of stuff about, oh gosh, Malcolm Gladwell's on the screen now. What did Malcolm say? Oh, Susanna Gora is on the screen now. What did she say? Those were kind of what my notes were. And I had several pages of notes, but to be fair, I used a really small notebook. So, it's not like yours.
Mine's not that. Mine's less than an 8.5 by 10.
Well, go ahead.
My notebook is crazy ideas.
I love it. It's perfect.
My next one will be shit I shouldn't have to teach to adults.
Good luck with that.
Yeah. So yeah, that is Brats. It is streaming on Hulu. I recommend it.
So did you do a message here really fast?
I was gonna say, do you have the Phil stuff?
The Phil stuff.
Capes and Lunatics, merch.
Oh,
YouTube.
Oh my God, I'm totally falling down on my job. So thank you to Phil and Perich, who is gallantly hosting us on Capes and Lunatics. I do not have the info for merch and for all the socials at this point because I flubbed. I'm sorry, Phil. Please.
We were supposed to film like 3 days ago. We were both like completely prepared. The makeup was makeuping. We had our drinks, like all of it. Like, and we had technical difficulties.
Dude, now you got Jen in her sports bra. I mean,
yeah. So okay.
So feel free to edit in anything about Capes and Lunatics and your socials because we really do appreciate you.
Yes, and when I hang up from here, I'm actually going to go and buy my Capes and Lunatics merch because I keep meaning to, and like the ADHD does its thing, and I'm on TikTok for 3 hours.
Well, tell me what you get because I need to get some Capes and Lunatics merch too. So
maybe it'll be a gift in 2 weeks.
Oh. We're gonna have fun.
Yeah. All right.
All right, well, thank you. I'm not sure, folks, what we're going to be doing next, but we will see you in about a month, maybe slightly less than a month. And have a safe 4th of July. Please remember that you are not supposed to hold firecrackers in your hand. There are people who are going into this weekend who will go in with 10 digits, and next weekend they will have fewer than that. So don't be one of them.
Have a safe and happy 4th.
I stole that from somebody, by the way. I'm not so clever as to have thought that.
Well, I think the only way to close is like Judd Nelson with our fists in the air. Have a good one, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.